cryptocurrency and decentralization are at the heart of what I think is an incredibly positive future for humanity. And we can start to talk about all the organizations, all the tech, all the people that are working really hard to create a decentralized future.
Good morning and welcome to White Mirror. This is our first ever episode. Very exciting. My name's Dave. I don't know anything about crypto. I don't know anything about decentralization. I don't know anything about Web3 or the blockchain. But Simon over there, he does. He knows everything. And he's going to explain and put into very, very layman terms what this is all about, because this is huge, right? This is a revolution, Si. Yeah?
That's the idea of White Mirror, Dave. That's what we're trying to do here. I think we're trying to aim this at people that might be, well, any ages, but specifically if you're in your late 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, older, and you're a bit confused perhaps about those terms that you just mentioned, Web3, crypto, blockchain, and specifically decentralization, then that's what we're going to try and go through. Decentralization being the most important theme, I think, of the next 20 years.
Yeah, like I say, it's a revolution, and the narrative strapline that we've got there, Simon, is what you came up with. I love that.
Well, one of the things that people think when they first come into this, or you ask people anywhere on the street, what's the first thought you have about crypto in your head at the moment? A lot of it's going to be negative, especially in the UK. And I think a lot of that is due to media bias, mainstream media bias. And it's a shame that all of the negative sides constantly come up, whether it be scams, money laundering, terrorist financing even. Of course, those things have existed in the past, but crypto is never presented with the positives as well. If I talk to people about cryptocurrency, their face changes immediately.
A bit like mine now.
Exactly. And you know a little bit about it, Dave. I mean, the question I have normally is, what is your first thought if someone says to you the word cryptocurrency? What's in your mind, Dave?
Unstable and scammy.
Right.
And also, like you say, that look on your face, there's a sort of fog comes over because I don't understand anything, really, not really, how the technology works, nothing, you know.
It's a shame because indeed the technology is incredible. The concept of decentralization is something that people should understand because I believe it's going to be incredibly beneficial to humanity over the next decade, 2 decades. And people should be catching up with what this means and what the specific differences between centralized, all of the institutions, central banks, governments, all of those systems of control, and the elements that are being brought in through decentralization, specifically related to finance, but not limited to. In fact, it will touch absolutely every industry: healthcare, travel, logistics, food, everything.
Yeah. And so like by definition, decentralization, as you just explained, takes us away from central control. And this is the most important thing, because look at what's the world at the moment is getting messy. It's getting really, really messy. And there's far too much power grab coming from the centralized agencies, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, we've all been used to banks over the last few decades, and going back really hundreds of years. Some of that's changing now pretty rapidly. And to have the idea that people might have about Bitcoin, let's just take that one cryptocurrency, the first Bitcoin from 2008, there's been this relentless bombardment from media. And I did actually want to go through a bit of that, Dave. Since, Bitcoin came along in 2008, and immediately since then, people have, all the media has talked so critically about it. So that's the end of Bitcoin then. I mean, this is 2011. It's from Forbes. And the price was $17 at that time. And they were already declaring the death of Bitcoin.
I'd have sold at that point. I can guarantee you, if I'd had any Bitcoin, I'd have sold it all.
Well, this is the funny thing about the price, to be honest. I think most people did sell. I mean, if you've got something that was worth a few pence and it suddenly went up to $17, you'd be fine with that.
Yeah, there's
But
only very few people hung on.
this has been the story all the way through Bitcoin. And if we fast forward a little to April 2013, the price is $135, and the Motley Fool, Alex, explains why Bitcoin is doomed to fail. All of these links, by the way, Dave, we'll put them in the description,
Okay.
the video description, so people can look at the full articles.
Long standing attack.
It goes on and on.
Yeah.
We can have a look. It's major news outlets such as CNBC, the BBC, certainly, as we'll see in a second, all the big ones. Bitcoin is in a bubble, and here's how it's going to crash. It was at 3,800 in September 2017.
3,800, that's where I would have been jumping off a bridge because I'd sold at 17.
Well, exactly. And then it's still a fantastic price. One thing to know all the way through this, Dave, none of this is going to be financial advice. We're not actually providing any advice to anybody and not recommending people buy it necessarily. Just the case is that people should look at both sides of the story, what the media is saying, and then look into things in a bit more detail. And that's what we're going to do in this show. But we really are just putting forwards the fact that the media has had this negative element to it all the way through. 5 reasons Bitcoin won't survive, as it had fallen, admittedly, from its peak in down to $10,221 at the time of this article, around that. And this is from investing.com. Is Bitcoin going to zero? Forbes has been incredibly negative all the way through.
I remember this really clearly because I know I understood that I needed $3,000 to invest in Bitcoin at this point, and I just didn't have it. I just didn't have the funds.
Right, yeah, kicking yourself.
So clearly.
In my opinion, Bitcoin is dead, is what the author of this article suggested. And then fast forward again, June 2022, the crypto crash, all Ponzi schemes topple eventually. The idea that Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme has been brought up again and again. People probably have heard this. But indeed, a Ponzi scheme is a very different... This is just a financial market like everything else. And what I really want to get across to people is that the price of Bitcoin has nothing really to do with what Bitcoin is. People will always value any asset in the way that they see it. It's the same thing with houses. Nobody after 2008, the GFC, the financial crisis, no one said, oh, my house has any less utility than it had before. It's still exactly the same house, but it was worth less. Mm-hmm. But there is, unfortunately, when it comes to Bitcoin, people do associate the two things as being one and the same. If the price falls, they blame Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And they say, oh, Bitcoin's a bad thing, isn't it? People lose a lot of... Yeah, maybe there has been this very, very volatile movement. It's an extremely speculative and has been volatile asset over the years. And I think that's just because people don't really know how to value it very well. But one thing's clear is that the trend has been continually up. The past is no guide to the future. However, that's kind of what we're showing here over the years. And I think anyone can see that Bitcoin has gone from something which was incredibly small scale and in the handful of a very small set of people, techies, and has changed now to a financial market with exchange-traded funds. Institutions are buying. There's major corporations that have been buying. There's much better government regulation now. A lot has changed over the last 5 years especially.
Okay.
So, I mean, we're here now. We're around $110,000 in early July 2025. That's where we are today. I noticed that actually this morning Bitcoin is reaching all-time highs, so even this presentation is a little bit out of date. But one thing So the information here, by the way, if you go to bitcoindeaths.com, this is a great site. It talks about how many times over the years Bitcoin has been declared dead by the mainstream media. And also, I mean, there's major publications in there, and the ones that we've sort of shown a few examples before, but also the actual critics you can see on the right here that are well-known names.
Well,
Pete Schiff, Warren Buffett.
and who are criticizing crypto but are heavily invested in Bitcoin.
Well, this could very well be the thing. What I'm worried about is that Bitcoin was supposed to be the people's currency, created by the people, potentially for the people, but there is so much misconception around it that they're not. It's more of the institutions that have been buying over the last 5 years or so. Some of the largest holders of the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF are the major banks like Goldman Sachs. Later in the show, we can perhaps talk about all of the different mainstream financial institutions that are already heavily invested on behalf of themselves or their clients.
Yeah.
And now regulation is changing to allow them to be custodians of cryptocurrency. So a lot is changing.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because you mentioned BlackRock there, who pretty much own everything, including the media. And there's some names up there, that are very heavily involved in media, BlackRock. And it just goes to show, doesn't it, how reversing the narrative, how important that is, because they're taking this away. They're starting to take this away from the people. You can see that. And they're doing it by manipulating the media and what people are perceiving about decentralization, because I think decentralization is a big threat to these sort of people.
Right.
Yeah.
The BBC is, I mean, it's not just about declaring Bitcoin is dead, but the types of narrative that have been used all the way through. We spoke earlier about the fact that many people's perception is of scams, money laundering, perhaps, or worse, of financing terrorist organizations and that sort of thing. So whilst I'm not going to say that those things don't occur at all, there are two sides to every story. I think one good example is that we don't stop using the telephone because of telephone scams. I think everybody understands that telephone scams are separate from the telephone and the technology and the usefulness of that technology. People have used the telephone for all sorts of positive reasons, but unfortunately, again, there is this strong link between the fact that there are players that have used crypto in negative ways, and then we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Are we allowed to say that these days? I'm not sure if that's good enough.
I don't know. Probably.
So, I mean, the BBC here is a good one. Criminals hide billions in crypto cash, Europol.
I don't need to tell you what I think of the BBC, Simon. I think you know that.
Exactly.
And what we're looking at here is, of course, what people are starting to realize, which is whatever the mainstream media says, do the opposite.
Maybe it could be the case, Dave. Crypto money laundering rises 30%. Frauds warning after 9 lose 1 million in crypto scam. North Korean hackers cash out. It's always like this. In fact, if you go to the there is actually a section on the BBC about cryptocurrency, you'll recognize that the vast majority of articles on here are incredibly fear-mongering. Even the ones that I've not highlighted here, they'll have a negative slant that's thrown in there just to but
this is why the general chat in the pub is, oh no, don't get into that, mate. No, it's too vulnerable, and it's a thoroughfare for criminals. This is the chat that you hear.
Yeah, and it's not just media. We could look at things like Hollywood. Crypto 2019 is a film that was centered on money laundering and Russian mafia, had this villainous
Not seen this.
Yeah, villainous slant to it all the way through. There's Dope in 2015, slightly more lighthearted, but still it's teens buying drugs online with Bitcoin. Coin
That's good.
heist
That's
in.
a good film.
I'm sure they're fun, but at the end of the day, they do set something in people's minds about
Yeah.
what crypto is related with. I just wish there was the balance. Coin heist, 2017. Group of high school students hacked the US Mint and used cryptocurrency to cover their tracks. In
Yeah.
fact, if you look at all the documentaries, anything related to cryptocurrency on Netflix, you'll see
Oh, Netflix.
they have a theme. Trust no one, bit conned. It's all like that.
It's another wing of the mainstream media, Netflix. It's very addictive. So, I mean, that I didn't know about any of this kind of, you don't realize until you've illustrated it there with the slideshow about how negative this has all come across to us and how this has been drilled into us. And then it's not a surprise, is it? It's not a surprise when you look at what you presented there, why we feel like this about this whole technology, really.
Yeah. I
It's,
don't know. I'm not going to go as far as to say that it is deliberate, but one thing's for sure, it certainly will affect the public conscious.
from my perspective, so I like I explained, I don't know anything. I don't know anything. I love it. I love the idea of decentralization, obviously. How does it look, Si? How does this look to us? Because it's a difficult thing to grasp. How's this going to look?
Well, this is now we're really touching on White Mirror. Why
Mm,
is it called White Mirror? I think a lot of people in the UK are familiar with Black Mirror, which is a TV series. I'm not sure if they've got it in the rest of the world, the US, etc. But Black Mirror is incredibly dystopian, negative. It's a view of the future which is worrying from all sorts of topics like AI, and oversight and identification and all of those topics. Now, White Mirror, I'd like to show the opposite side of the coin. Perhaps there is a very, very positive version of the future. And what we want to do on this channel is portray that and show
yeah,
why cryptocurrency and decentralization are at the heart of what I think is an incredibly positive future for humanity. And we can start to talk about all the organizations, all the tech, all the people that are working really hard to create a decentralized future.
yeah.
And people should understand what that means and why they're doing it. Bitcoin and currencies are only a tiny part of what's going on. So we're going to cover all sorts of different projects in Web3.
Okay. And this, do you think this is going to become something that's simple to use? Like the interface might become a little bit more simple to use?
Certainly, in terms of if we're just looking at payments and things, people are very familiar with Apple Pay and Google Pay and
Yes.
those sorts of things, tapping your phone. I think that will continue. The only difference is that we'll be tapping and it will be cryptocurrencies. That's
Yeah.
my hope for it. Transactions are cheap. We can have tiny micro transactions, so things that might be less than a cent or a penny. And we can remunerate people in all sorts of different ways. I think that's the key here. Incentivization is going to change. People will have all sorts of new reasons to be involved through
Yeah.
incentivization.
Okay. So, and the other thing that is not very clear to me is who owns this? Who runs this?
Yeah, it's a good question. No one. That's the main thing. The blockchain is public infrastructure. It's run by thousands of nodes or validators. And people will have heard of miners in Bitcoin miners.
Yeah.
We'll talk about energy and things like that because there's also a very negative slant on the fact that Bitcoin uses large amounts of energy. We'll talk about that in later episodes, hopefully. And there's not only negative to that, but generally, who owns it? Nobody. We all own it. That's the main thing. Anybody can participate in the blockchain, move money. I can move money to you or to other people, family, friends, without any institutions in between. It's just us and the blockchain.
Yeah.
Who decides what's right if there is no authority figure, if there's no one at the top or if there's no company that's running this, who decides what is true and what is false.
Yeah.
Well, that is something that is done through consensus. And the thousands of validators in different cryptocurrencies, you must have at least 50%, or in some cases even more than that, to agree and come to consensus that I've sent you money, or you've sent me, or whatever. Whatever transaction is occurring is validated by the whole network, and every validator will do that. And if any individual validator tries to change the truth, that truth will be rejected by the rest of the network. So it is literally decentralization in action. It's us and the blockchain and no institutions.
I think what we're talking about here is a true democracy, right? And perhaps this is why the mainstream media and the big boys don't like it.
Yeah, it's a level playing field. It's made fair, absolutely. There's a big element of on-chain voting. So in decentralized autonomous organizations, and this is a new term, DAO, DAO. It's been around a good, maybe almost 10 years now, but people don't even understand that there are companies that are operating without traditional entities through communities. There's no leader. They are decentralized, autonomous organizations. And in fact, DAOs are the thing that run quite a large number of the cryptocurrencies. They make decisions through on-chain voting, and their governance systems work like that. People do certain things, and they put proposals forwards, people vote on them. And that's how a lot of decisions are being made in Web3. So I think one thing that we haven't really defined very well is Web3. And I think people will be quite familiar with generally what the difference was between Web 1 and Web 2.
I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure.
Well, let me clarify. So Web 1 was the introduction of the internet, and a lot of it was just reading websites. They were almost like newspapers at that time, and it was extremely simplistic. You had to be a techie to put something onto the web. Everybody now should be familiar with Web 2, whether they call it that or not. We have social media, where people post things all the time. We have smartphones, apps, and the evolution of the internet changed at that point. We had, MySpace, Facebook came along. I think that we're even talking early 2000s here, really. Now, that's been the prevailing trend for the last really 20 years. And a lot of it has been centralized. We've got big tech, we've got the big Googles, Apples, Amazons, etc. And Web3 is the next evolution. It's where we start to take things back again. It's where we start to take the web back, and we look at privacy again. And indeed, we have decentralization that I've been describing. So Web3 is this next evolution.
Okay, so there's the white mirror.
Yeah, and the more we go into it over these episodes, the more fascinating I think people will find it. I really want to push this to people over, in their late 30s, over 40s, 50s, because they might be missing a big chunk of what's going on, and explaining it in very simplistic layman's terms is what we're trying to do, Dave.
I've got to say that, with you explaining about Web3 decentralization, I personally, as a layman, like a lot of people who are watching this will feel the same, that I'm starting to understand how important this is. Really, it's so important. The way the world is at the moment, something like this it's going to be a grand solution. I'm really looking forward to the next episode. I'm really looking forward to diving in deep about how this is all going to work, how it's going to look, Si, and how we're going to, get ourselves into it. It's very, very exclusive at the moment, and quite scary. So I'm really, really looking forward to that.
Yeah, Dave.
All right, mate. So anyway, we'll catch up on the next episode. Thanks for everything. Thanks for preparing all that. And super cool. Thank you, mate.
Good stuff. Thank you, Dave.
Speak to you soon.
See ya.
Si. Could you just quickly go through the disclaimer?
Sure, Dave. So White Mirror is created to entertain and inform about Web3 and decentralization. None of this is financial advice. Crypto investments are considered high risk and can result in total loss of capital. The past is no guide to the future. There's no guarantees of return or profit here. You must do your own research. Crypto is largely unregulated in many countries. Tax laws apply, and you should seek tax advice if necessary. White Mirror does not endorse any cryptocurrency whatsoever.